The afternoon sun glinted off the polished concrete driveway as Karen Sterling, self-styled president of the Lakeshore Estates HOA, droned on about property encroachment, while I stood by the edge of my private pond. She towered over me, her bulk dressed in a crisp polo with the HOA crest stitched above the pocket, a grotesque badge of entitlement. Her voice, sharp as shattered glass, cut through the quiet birdsong. "You're trespassing," she declared, waving a stack of violation notices. I watched her hips shift imperiously, imagining the instant gratification she felt wielding her little empire's rules like a cudgel. But I already knew her definition of trespass extended only as far as my fence line. Beyond that, my land was sovereign. I'd given her a polite warning, then tried reasoning. She'd smiled condescendingly, flashed that awful, "I'll just be a minute," as she left to fetch more paperwork. 3 hours later, her Porsche lay inverted in the deep end of the pond, floating like a territorial warning. My pulse thrummed with a dark satisfaction not born of cruelty, but of righteous retribution. Memories unraveled like a film reel of all her petty tyrannies. The time she fined me for hosting a family barbecue, because my nephew's laughter disturbed the neighborhood aesthetic. The evening she confronted my wife at the gate, nostrils flaring as if she'd smelled a crime. Even the time she demanded I uproot my heirloom rosebushes because they violated HOA color guidelines. Each indignity had stoked my quiet fury, but I'd held back until that day. I'd spent months gathering evidence. Hidden cameras, eyewitness accounts, emails proving her vendettas. I'd logged every unauthorized fine imposed on residents, every clandestine vote rigged at board meetings. Then I discovered her secret: a backdoor deal with a local developer hungry to expand a casino resort. Her fines financed his bribes, and her coercion bought him access to private land. That revelation set the stage for my counterstrike. What nobody expected was the midday maintenance emergency I'd scheduled. A broken main water valve at the community center right next to the pond. As HOA members scrambled to shut off hydrants and assess flood risk, I slipped into the groundskeeper's shed with my gear: a manual winch, reinforced cables, and a remote-activated buoy anchor. I timed it perfectly during her 3-hour errand. My planted leak gushed into the drainage culvert that fed the pond, raising water levels by inches per minute. When I saw her stroll back, tablet in hand, ready to lecture me once more, I pressed the button. Cables whirred, the winch strained, and in an instant the Porsche's wheels slipped off the concrete lip. She screamed as metabolism of panic set in, her gravity-defying car slid into the murky depths. Onlookers gasped. Phones rose to capture every horrifying moment. Karen, drowning in her own hubris, clawed at empty air as the hatch locked behind her. I stayed back, heart pounding, tears misting my eyes, not for her demise, but for the justice I'd engineered. The aftermath was electric. Photos of her half-submerged Porsche splashed across neighborhood message boards. One picture showed the plume of muddy water as the car sank. Another captured her horrified reflection in the windshield. Locals whispered about her accident, unaware of her crimes. But I had evidence: a USB drive I dropped in the pond just minutes before, floating inside a waterproof canister. Inside, spreadsheets of fines, audio recordings of her threats, emails detailing her dirty deal with the developer. I delivered the drive to the county attorney's office that evening, along with the HOA's bank statements I'd subpoenaed. By morning, every local news channel was reporting on HOA Sterling's downfall. Her home was raided by investigators, the developer's plans frozen. The community rallied behind me, grateful for a hero they never knew they needed. Yet the real twist came when her own secretary, Marisol Lopez, stepped forward in tears at a public meeting. Marisol, the soft-spoken woman who'd endured Karen's tirades for years, produced a video diary she'd secretly recorded. In it, Karen confessed to rigging votes, forging signatures, even threatening families to force compliance. Her voice, unguarded and urgent, described the joy she felt watching neighbors crumble under her fines. Marisol's testimony sent shockwaves through the HOA board. As cameras rolled, Karen's facade crumbled. She stood mute, red-faced, as the board voted unanimously to remove her and dissolve the HOA charter entirely. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, pride in justice, sorrow at the bitterness of her confession. In the days that followed, neighborhood life shifted. The paved driveways remained spotless, but the weight of her absence breathed new air into our streets. Families reclaimed their front yards, planting wildflowers where sterile hedges once stood. Neighbors gathered around my pond, now calm, reflecting the sky and the tall pines. Children skipped stones across the surface as if erasing the memory of that afternoon's spectacle. The county rewrote the HOA statutes, limiting board power and requiring transparency. Karen's Porsche was salvage scrapped for evidence, and her assets frozen pending restitution. She now faced felony charges for embezzlement, coercion, and reckless endangerment. As I stand on the old dock, stone beneath my feet, I realize this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming the dignity we'd lost to her tyranny. It was about reminding everyone that power is a tool for service, not oppression. And in the silent glint of the pond's ripples, I feel a shift of hope that fairness can outlast fear. So now I ask you, was my retaliation justified, or did I cross the line? Share your verdict, right or wrong, and let's decide together where justice truly resides. The morning sunlight slanted across the courtroom's high windows as I watched Karen Sterling shuffle into the defendant's box, shoulders slumped beneath the weight of handcuffs and whispered rumors. The air was thick with anticipation. Residents, reporters, and county officials packed every available seat, some craning for a view of the fallen HOA queen. I sat in the front row, notebook in hand but with nothing to jot down. Every fact was etched into my memory. When the judge called the session to order, silence fell like a shroud. Prosecutors laid out the case. Embezzlement of HOA funds funneled into the developer's account, coercion of neighbors through illegal fines, falsified meeting minutes, and reckless endangerment by engineering the pond flood. Each count carried the weight of betrayal, but the flood incident remained the most visceral symbol of her hubris. Karen's defense attorney attempted to paint her as a dedicated community servant, whose methods were heavy-handed but motivated by safety and aesthetics. He argued that the flood was an accident caused by an unforeseen valve failure, that any culpability lay with the maintenance crew he claimed I had tampered with. The room buzzed as he finished, but the prosecution was prepared. They played the pondside video from Marisol's secret recordings, Karen's own admission that she'd authorized a minor demonstration to scare me into compliance. Viewers heard her laugh as she described watching my face when water first lapped at the Porsche's tires. There was no doubt left in the jurors' minds. When the jury filed out, I felt a tremor in the wooden pew, as if the entire courtroom exhaled. I locked eyes briefly with Marisol, her face pale but determined. She had risked everything to expose Karen's cruelty. A surge of gratitude warmed me, and I gave her a small nod. Outside, the community center's courtyard brimmed with reporters. I stepped under the overhang, press badges jangling as microphones thrust toward me. I kept my statement concise. I never intended physical harm, only accountability. The evidence would speak for itself. Questions swirled around me. Had I gone too far? Would the jury sympathize with a neighbor who'd engineered such a dramatic spectacle? I offered no further comment and slipped away. 20 minutes later, the jury returned. As the foreperson stood, everyone held their breath. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Karen's shoulders slumped further. A sob escaped her. Handcuffs clicked tighter. Someone in the back whispered, "Poetic justice." I closed my eyes briefly, the memory of the sun glittering on that sinking Porsche vivid as ever. But beneath satisfaction lay an uneasy ache, for justice had been served, but the rift in our community would take years to heal. Over the next week, Lakeshore Estates transformed. The HOA board was dissolved, replaced by an interim council elected by residents. Transparency became the mantra. Every meeting was live-streamed, every vote recorded. Community funds were audited by an independent committee. Marisol chaired it, her quiet resilience inspiring trust. Neighbors pooled resources to rebuild the pond's edge, adding native reeds and a small wooden gazebo where families could gather. The scar from the Porsche incident remained, a concrete lip still stained where the car had slipped, but it served as a reminder of both hubris and resilience. Karen Sterling was remanded to county jail pending sentencing. At her modest home, where once the HOA crest flew above the door, a bailiff changed the locks. Rumors spread that she'd written frantic letters to every county official, begging for leniency, claiming she'd been manipulated by the developer. None responded. In the parking lot of the impound yard, The Porsche sat draped in plastic, engine irreparably damaged. Its HOA Sterling license plate was auctioned off by the county, proceeds donated to a new neighborhood scholarship fund. I received an email from the county attorney's office, a request to testify at sentencing about the impact of Karen's schemes on residents' lives. Reluctantly, I agreed. On the day of sentencing, I sat again in the courtroom gallery, older faces among the crowd, couples who'd been fined for children's laughter, veterans threatened with liens, seniors intimidated into voting. One by one they rose to speak, how fear had driven them indoors, how small joys had been stifled by her petty rules. Tears fell as they recounted garage door fines, garden restrictions, even penalties for hanging wind chimes. When it was my turn, I described how a neighborhood became a battleground over a single pond, how trust had been shattered, and how justice, though delayed, could restore dignity. Judge Walker, stern and unflinching, cited each count: embezzlement, coercion, reckless endangerment, and fraud. He sentenced Karen Sterling to 5 years in state prison, restitution to the HOA account, and a permanent ban from holding any public office. The gavel struck like thunder. A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom. Outside, reporters clamored for interviews. Residents offered tearful thanks. I stayed back, quietly slipping out as the doors opened. In the weeks that followed, my life regained its old rhythms, though underlaid by a new purpose. I organized monthly cleanups at the pond, leading morning yoga sessions on the dock. My neighbors joined announced isolated individuals now connected by shared experience. We planted wildflowers along the shoreline, installed birdhouses, and hosted quarterly potlucks where HOA tensions dissolved into laughter. Children chased frogs at dusk, couples strolled hand in hand, and the community center buzzed with workshops on ethical leadership and conflict resolution. Marisol became a hero, invited to speak at county seminars on nonprofit governance. She published a memoir titled Unwritten Minutes, exposing the Queen of Lakeshore Estates, her royalties funding neighborhood youth programs. I helped her launch a podcast series, interviewing residents about their own battles with entitlement and power. Each episode ended with a simple question: how can communities hold leaders accountable before they abuse authority? Download numbers climbed steadily, sparking dialogues in HOA forums across the state. Karen's fall resonated beyond our pond. Newspapers ran exposés on HOA abuses nationwide, and several states proposed legislation to cap HOA fines and mandate independent audits. The narrative had shifted. No longer was HOA leadership an unchecked realm of petty dictators. Transparency and resident involvement became core values. I received emails from strangers in neighboring counties, thanking me for setting a precedent. I never claimed heroism, only the courage to act when tyranny escalated to threat. One crisp autumn evening, I returned to the pond's edge. The water mirrored the blazing sunset, reeds whispering in the breeze. I knelt to gather fallen leaves, remembering the chaos of that trial and the sinking car echoing hubris into murky depths. But this pond now symbolized renewal. I rose, turning toward the gazebo where voices drifted, a guitar melody, laughter, the clink of mugs, community. As I walked home, I felt a lightness I hadn't known under Karen's reign. Justice had prevailed not through violence but through truth, through evidence, courage, and solidarity. And while power could corrupt, it could also shift when people dared to reclaim it. My final thought as the porch light glowed ahead was a quiet promise: to keep watch, to stay vigilant, and to ensure that no one ever wields a neighbor's dreams as a weapon again.